guys, I'm Kim and welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me here today. As you can probably tell from the title of this video, this is our miscarriage story. So I was contemplating whether or not I wanted to put this online or whether I wanted to talk about it. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it is something that I wanted to do and to give my experiences of what happened during this process, because I think that putting things like that out into the universe and letting other people know that they're not alone is so important. And I myself know that going through this process and this loss, I did seek comfort in watching other people's videos to see whether or not what I was experiencing and what I was going through, whether or not it was normal. So I am going to talk you through today how we found out we lost our little baby, and also let you know how it happened. So there is going to be a lot of detailed information in here, probably a little bit too much information at some points, but I feel like it needs to be said to really understand and explain what I went through. Because the one thing I will say is what happened to me, I was completely and totally unprepared for. It was one of the most traumatizing and painful experiences of my life. So if that is something that you're interested in hearing about and finding out our journey and the length of time and the process of it all, then stick around. So I am going to be reading off my phone because I've got dates and notes about what, how, when and where things had happened, because it was just very drawn out, as you all hear, and I needed to remind myself of how it all happened. So I just want to start off by saying that I am so sorry for anyone who has been through this themselves. You know, I'd heard stories before of friends who had a miscarriage or experienced a loss, and you know, yes, you feel for them and it's upsetting, but I don't think you will ever understand the full impact of it unless you've experienced it yourself. I know that it completely changed my mind and gave me so much respect towards any women who have been through this themselves. It really was one of the most horrible things that I've ever been through. So my heart goes out to you if you have been through that. I'm assuming if you're here watching this video, you are either currently waiting for it to happen, or it has happened to you and you're trying to seek comfort in knowing that you're not alone. So, or whether you are pregnant and you're like me and you are nervous and worried and you just want to watch all the videos out there you can and try and understand as much as you can in case things happen, then that's what I'm here for today. So sorry if this is getting a bit rambly. I just have a lot of thoughts and feelings about this situation, and I want to be very sensitive about the subject as well. Alright, so to start with, I will let you know that we found out that we were pregnant at 10 days past ovulation, and I think that was on the 19th of May 2022, and we found out that we lost the baby on the 29th of June. When we miscarried, I thought I was 10 weeks and 5 days, but we were actually, when we actually went for the ultrasound, it was identified that I'd actually lost the baby at about 6 weeks and 3 days. So that was a whole month of us thinking that we were pregnant, only to find out that our little baby had passed weeks ago. I believe this is what they call a missed miscarriage. Okay, so I'm going to read through my notes here, so sorry if I'm looking down. So on the 20th of June, I had a doctor's appointment as I'd noticed a little bit of stringy, veiny little bits of blood. Like they were so tiny, but it was just inside of my cervical mucus, and I'd never seen that before. I also had a slight milky brown kind of color to my cervical mucus in the mornings, but in the evening it would clear up and go back to a clear normal color. So this had been happening for, I'm going to say, about 5 to 7 days. So I decided to make a doctor's appointment just to check it up. So I had let the doctor know about what was going on, and she said, just to be safe, I'll give you a referral form to get an ultrasound done, just for peace of mind. I rang up to get an ultrasound, and the earliest I could get in was the 29th of June. So that was 9 days after my doctor's appointment. So on the 23rd, my cervical mucus was going from clear to milky brown again, and I was still getting some more of those stringy bits. I wasn't experiencing any cramps or pains or anything like that, and this was constantly just happening right up until my scan. A couple of days before the scan on the 29th, I just had like this really bad, shitty feeling that something was wrong. And a few people that knew about the pregnancy had asked me whether I had a gut feeling, and deep down, I did have a bad feeling that something wasn't right, but I wasn't really emotionally ready to verbalize that and admit that I thought something was wrong, because naturally I am the biggest stress head and worrier, and I honestly thought that I was probably just overplaying it and dramatizing the situation in my head, and that in my head I thought, I'm going to go to that appointment on the 29th and I'm going to see a heartbeat, and there's going to be a little fetus in there and everything's going to be fine. And that's what I kept telling myself, but deep down I just had this horrible gut feeling. Anyway, on the 29th I had the ultrasound booked in at 8:30 in the morning, so it was the first appointment of the day. My husband and I went in there. The ultrasound lady was really nice. I was already really nervous, and I went in there shaking and worried, and just really upset. And the tech picked up on this straight away, and she asked me then if I had a bad feeling, and I just said to her that I do have a bad feeling. I haven't had much luck in the medical department over the last few years, and this is probably just another thing, and I'm just worried. And she's like, yep, I completely understand. She went through, what she was going to do with me. So they were going to perform a external ultrasound on my stomach first, and then afterwards they were going to do a transvaginal ultrasound to get a clearer picture. So they did the external ultrasound on my stomach, and she was kind of like, going around a little bit, and she wasn't really saying much, but she did end up finding the pregnancy sac, and she said that to get a clearer picture they were going to now do the vaginal one. So I went and got prepared for that. I came back and she said that just give me 5-10 minutes. She's like, I'm just going to take all the measurements and look at everything I need to, and then I am going to let you know what I've found. So I was laying there on the bed, and I was holding my husband's hand, and I was looking at the screen, and I was looking at him, and I'd seen images and videos and pictures of people's 10-week ultrasounds, and mine did not look like a 10-week-old baby. And at this point my stomach just dropped, and I knew something was wrong. And it was the longest 5 minutes of my life. I was just holding onto my husband's hand and squeezing it really tight, and I had tears rolling down my cheeks, and I was just waiting for her to tell us the bad news. Anyway, once she'd finished, she kind of looked at us and said, "I don't have good news for you." She's like, "Unfortunately, the baby has no heartbeat, and it looks like it stopped growing at 6 weeks and 3 days." So at this point, I was just absolutely a blubbering mess and was distraught, as I'm sure you can imagine. She left the room and gave us some privacy, and we just, were there for each other. So from there, she told us to book an appointment with my GP straight away to work out where to next. I rang up my obstetrician to try and get an appointment, but unfortunately they were on leave. So I ended up having to see another obstetrician at the same clinic, and I was able to get in with them that afternoon. And when we went in there, they gave us, they just confirmed what we already knew, told us that it looked like the baby had passed. They said that at this point, they just want to basically let nature take its course and see whether it happens naturally. And so we found this out on a Wednesday, and I got told to wait until the weekend was over to see whether anything would happen or whether anything will have kick-started. And then they would work out whether or not I needed to potentially have a D&C. So, there wasn't really much information at that appointment. They just said that they didn't want to jump in and do a D&C straight away because, sometimes things can be wrong, and that on the very rare occasion, sometimes the fetus could still be alive. And that just gives you a little bit of hope, but it's really hard. Like when somebody tells you that, it was only a few hours before we were told you lost the baby, and now someone gives you a glimmer of hope, and you don't really know what to think. Anyway, so we went home, started processing the loss. So at this point, I was still getting brown discharge. So I've got here, from now on, I'm just going to have a bit of a read through what actually happened from the days following that. So on the 30th, which was the day after we found out, I had brown discharge and a tiny bit of blood. On the 1st of July, I had a small amount of blood in the morning and nothing for the rest of the day. And then on the 2nd, I had light blood on and off with a really small clot. And then on the 3rd of the 7th, I had light blood in the morning and a couple of small clots. So I kind of thought, all right, something's happening, this is how it's going to play out. On the 4th, I had on and off bleeding with small clots in the afternoon. And then on the 5th, I had light bleeding all day, but never much in the pad. So it was more that I would notice the blood when I'd wiped. And then on the 6th, I had light bleeding all day, usually only noticeable when wiping, and some really, really mild cramps. So at this point, we were 1 week past finding out that we'd lost the baby, and we'd still had no real crazy signs that anything was going to happen. So I had a couple of phone appointments just checking in to see how things were progressing, and I had another appointment scheduled for, I think it was the 11th, but we'll get to that with my normal GP. On the 7th, I'd had lots of cramping through the night. When I woke up in the morning, I felt something come out. Like when I went to the toilet, it's like I felt like a clot come out, and I looked in the toilet afterwards, and when I'd wiped, there was a lot of blood. And because I didn't really know what to expect, I honestly, I was like, oh, that must have been it. I must have miscarried. I know that sounds uneducated completely, but I was told that having a miscarriage would be like a heavy period and might be a little bit painful. So in my head, this seemed like a heavy period and a little bit of cramping. So I honestly thought that was it, and it was done and dusted. On the next day, which was a Thursday, which was the 8th of the 7th, I woke up at 3 a.m. in the morning with extremely bad cramping. I had really bad lower back pain, and I was having lots and lots of clots come out, ranging from the size of a marble up to potentially a bit bigger than a golf ball. And they looked like chopped liver. Like it was disgusting. I was like in tears and crying because I had no idea what was happening to me or what to expect, because I know they said heavy period was possible, but this was so far from what I'd ever experienced before in my life. I had this cramping and pain and bleeding constantly go on, so from 3 a.m. until 11 a.m. that day. So around 10 a.m. ish, I had called my mum and asked if she could bring a hot water bottle around to try and help with the cramps and the pain. And I was just in bed, like curled up in a ball in tears, and like the bleeding was just constant. And we started getting a little bit worried, so I called the local hospital and explained to them what was going on, and they requested that I came in. So we did. We went down there and I got checked out. And they told me that what I was experiencing seemed normal, all my vitals and everything were fine. And while I was there, they prescribed me with some Panadeine Forte. So I took that, and the cramping like slowed down, almost completely stopped, and the bleeding almost completely stopped as well. That I thought that was it. I thought that I was done, and for sure that had to have been the end of it. That evening I went to bed and everything was fine, and I thought, yep, okay, it's happened, I can move on, and everything's going to be all right now. However, at about 1 a.m. in the morning on the 9th of the 7th, the pains were so intense again, even worse than the night before. I was in absolute agony. Like, I thought the night before was bad, but this was so intense. I was passing lots and lots of clots, like really large ones, some up to the size of like lemons and apples. It was ridiculous. So I was in the shower with the hot water running on me just to try and help ease the pain, and I saw like the clots would, like every time I was cramping, like the clots were just falling out of me, and I could see them on the shower floor. And obviously when you're in the shower, like water dilutes things, but like just looking down and like blood was just running down my legs. It was horrible. I feel sorry for my husband that he had to witness and see all of this, but he was so supportive and he was there for me, even though he knew there was nothing he could do to help me like physically, but he was there for me emotionally. So I was in the shower on and off probably for about 3 or 4 hours, and I had started to feel extremely nauseous and just incredibly weak and lightheaded, and I started worrying that maybe I was like losing like too much blood and I didn't know what was normal. So I'd asked my husband to go and put a towel down on the bed because I just really needed to lay down. So I went and laid down, and I experienced 3 to 4 of the worst cramps that I had had all night. And I had this like sudden urge to go to the toilet and like poo. I felt constipated. It was the weirdest thing. And I got up and I dragged myself to the bathroom, and I sat on the toilet and I pushed, and I thought I was trying to poop, but I actually felt like all this stuff just like gush out of me. Like I can still visualize and imagine that feeling. I can't even describe it. I just felt huge amounts come out, and because I hadn't actually seen like the sac, like the pregnancy sac or the fetus come out, I assumed that that's what it had to have been. And then all of a sudden the cramps stopped, the pain disappeared, the color came back in my face, and I felt normal. It was like the weirdest thing, like to have been experiencing that level of pain and then to have it just completely stop. I didn't look in the toilet because I couldn't. I didn't want to know. Yeah, we'll leave that one at that. I just was so thankful and happy that that pain had stopped and that it was over. By the time this had all finished, it was about 4 a.m. in the morning and I was so exhausted. I had cleaned myself up, I put a pad back on and I went back to bed, and I didn't wake up till 11:30 the next morning. So I think I was just so exhausted and tired from what I'd just been through over the past 48 hours. That day, on the 10th, I still had some small clots and light bleeding, and I was feeling very sad and emotional about the fact that I knew the loss had definitely happened and we were no longer pregnant. On the 11th, I still had some bleeding and small clots, and then on the 12th, I had a little less bleeding and I had an ultrasound that afternoon, and that confirmed that I still had some retained product. So I was absolutely shocked to know that there was still product left in my uterus after everything that I had seen come out. So I had to book another appointment that afternoon to follow up with what the next steps were. So I went to the GP and they gave me 3 options. They said I can either wait again and see whether things happen and progress naturally. They could give me a medication that would help like bring on the contractions and hopefully push the rest of it out, but there was a potential that it could cause the same kind of intense cramps and pain that I had previously been through, or I could have a D&C. So they called my local hospital and they said that if I wanted to have the D&C I could, but it was okay to wait as well if I wanted to. Because I didn't want to go through the pain, I chose not to have the medication, and I really wanted to avoid the surgery if I could. So I chose to wait another week and see what would happen, and then I had another scheduled ultrasound to see whether or not the rest of the retained product had come out. So the day after the scan, I had some more bleeding and some minor cramping, and then on the 14th, which was 2 days after that scan, I had some more bleeding. But then on the 15th, 16th and 17th, I had no bleeding at all. So I just assumed that it was done and it was all over with, and those last couple of days must have just gotten the last bit of product out of my uterus and that the miscarriage was done. So on the 18th, I had another scan scheduled just to confirm that there was nothing in there. I still had no bleeding, but at the ultrasound, they had confirmed that I still had retained product. So this was not ideal, and my stomach just dropped again because by now, this stage, this process had been going on for almost 3 weeks, and I'd been on and off of work, and I was just so emotional, and I was at the point where I was just exhausted and over it, and I felt like I couldn't have closure because the miscarriage just wasn't complete. I also found out, I forgot to mention earlier, that I also had a subchronic hematoma in my uterus, which apparently was just like another small sac of some kind of blood on the uterus lining. It could have been what the original bleeding was caused by, but they don't think that it would have been the cause of the miscarriage. So I got sent down that afternoon by my GP to the Lau Mac to be assessed for a D&C. So I got told to pack a bag, go to the Lau Mac, and basically they would probably keep me in overnight and I would have the D&C the next morning. However, when I got there, that wasn't the case. So we waited in the waiting room for a while and I finally got assessed. They took some bloods, looked at my scans and confirmed that yes, I would need the surgery. However, they couldn't actually get me in until the 21st. So this was 2 days wait again still. So more waiting. So I was booked in for 6:45 on the morning of the 21st of July for the D&C. And they gave me a medication called misoprostol, I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it, but I had to take this at 6 a.m. To basically help my cervix get ready for the surgery. Evidently this was the medication that they wanted to give me, or they gave me an option to take about a week ago to like get the uterus cramping and contracting to try and get rid of the product. On the 20th I still had no bleeding and a little bit of cramping. And then on the morning of the 21st, that was my D&C day. I went in for the surgery. That morning I got there at 6:45 a.m. and I was the first surgery of the day because I was classed as an emergency surgery. So I'm just going to read the notes from that day because it was all a bit of a blur because they put you under a general anesthetic for this procedure. I was admitted at 6:45 and my surgery was marked as an emergency. I was the first operation of the day. I was taken to surgery at about 8:45. I saw my anaesthetist and I had the risks explained to me. I was told that I would be put under and the operation would only take 10 to 15 minutes if it was a straightforward, easy process and there were no complications. I woke up at 9:45 a.m. and I was crying, but I did not know why. I think I was just really emotional and I was scared because of the risks that they'd explained to me prior to the procedure. So they have to go through, you know, all of the things that can happen. Worst case scenario being that if things didn't go well, you could end up having to have a full hysterectomy. So I think maybe I woke up crying because I was so worried that I had no idea what was going on and I just wanted to know that everything went okay. So I got taken through to recovery at 10 a.m. and I was monitored for 2 hours and then got discharged at 12 p.m. Arrived at 6:45, left at 12. So it was just day surgery. Everything went well and there was no complications, thankfully. And I got told that basically there could be some bleeding for up to a couple of weeks afterwards. And that I had to not have anything inserted into the vagina for 2 weeks after surgery. This is to prevent any potential infection. And then I got told to schedule an appointment 2 weeks post-op with my GP just as a follow-up. So I only bled for about 3 days after the surgery, but I just had like this really kind of heavy feeling in my uterus for about 4 or 5 days. But then after that, everything just went back to normal and I felt myself again. So on the 5th of August, I had a follow-up appointment with my GP and they said that everything was fine and they just spoke to me about the future and whether or not we were still planning on trying for a family. So yeah, that was it. That was my miscarriage story. So in total, from finding out that we had miscarried to actually finally having the miscarriage dealt with via D&C in the end, it was just shy of 4 weeks of dealing with this. I am unfortunate enough to have to go through this again. I now know that I would push and opt to have that D&C straight away because you know that that is final and that there's not going to be any more waiting around, and from there you can move forward and start planning for the future and work out when you're emotionally ready to start trying again. I hope that you found this video informative and helpful and it gives you an insight into what a miscarriage can be like. I know that a lot of people experience various different types depending on what stage of pregnancy your loss was at. But yeah, this was my experience. And as I mentioned before, if you have been through this yourself, I am so sorry. My heart goes out to you and I do sincerely hope that you get your little rainbow baby one day. I know that's currently what we are hoping for, and I do plan to keep you updated on our trying to conceive journey to hopefully finally get a healthy little baby in our lives. So yeah, this was our first pregnancy. So yeah, it was all very new to us. So thank you so much for joining me here today, and thank you for sticking through to the end. I know it was a long video, but I really just felt like I had to let you know every step of the way and what had happened for you to fully understand what the experience for us was like. If you found this video helpful or you enjoyed it, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button down below so you can stay tuned and see what happens in our life in the future, and hopefully we will have some good news for you someday soon about being pregnant. And don't forget to hit that little bell as well so you'll get notified of my videos in the future. Until next time, bye guys.